So how did Barry Trotz do in his first season as the second general manager in Nashville Predators history? We're going to talk about that today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this week, this Monday episode, with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everydayers who tune in each and every weekday to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. We appreciate your support. We love that we get to spend just a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
I'm Emma Lingen, and I am the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
So Emma and I are kicking off our review of the 2023-24 individual performances from the season. And of course, Emma and I, we like to start at the top. This was Barry Trotz's first season at the helm with the Nashville Predators. It's the first time the franchise has been led by anyone other than David Poile. So a huge moment for the franchise. We're going to talk about what Barry Trotz did with the situation he inherited, the best and maybe worst decisions that he may have made in his first year. And we're going to talk about the big things on his plate coming up. Now, Emma, I'm just going to throw this out there and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that you had to be Scooby-Doo driving the mystery machine around Nashville to figure out that probably Barry Trotz was going to be the next GM after David Poile, even before it was announced. So why do you think Trotz was such a great candidate for this job?
Well, I think in Nashville, it's a market where the history and the continuity is very important, especially like you said, there had only been one GM in the entire organizational history. And that, I mean, granted, yes, the Predators are an expansion team, but in the 25-year history, there had been one guy at the head of it. And so everything's done a certain way, and it takes a very special understanding of the culture, of the market, of everything that goes into that. And so I think it made sense for someone who had been part of that to come and, really understand what they're coming into here. And I think that Barry, obviously being the first coach of the Predators and the longest tenured coach at that, I think was, a really good candidate. And not just about, yes, he's worked here, but he lives here and he lives in Nashville. He has kept his home in Nashville this entire time, and his family, his kids were raised here. Like it's, I think, important in a market like Nashville for someone to be part of the community and really kind of understand what the city's all about. So yeah, I think it, like you said, slam dunk decision, made total sense.
Yes. I loved it too, because we see so much rotation in coaching, in general managing. You see kind of the same candidates moving from here to there. And I loved that Barry Trotz was somebody who was new at general managing, which has its ups and downsides transitioning. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I love that he was somebody who was new to this role, but also somebody, like you said, who had a built-in connection to the franchise and the community, because there is just sort of I think a different emotional investment. Not that every general manager, wherever they are, doesn't want to be successful, but for Barry Trotz, I think this was the perfect place, the perfect situation to step into a role. And again, I loved that it wasn't just rotating the same person around. That's a whole nother podcast for a whole nother day, my friend. But we could do a whole talk on why we see the same names over and over and over again. But
it's a revolving door.
It is a revolving door. Yes, over and over again. But anyway, I really could go off. But I think it was interesting to bring Barry Trotz back in the transition the way they did it, because being a general manager, I so would love to sit down with Trotz and talk about this, because it's a different skill set. in some ways than coaching, because your perspective is very different. Like, I feel like John Hines had shared one time, like he kind of looks at, the three sort of chunks of time in the regular season and then the off season. But as a general manager, you're looking like 2 to 5 years ahead. So your perspective is different. And I think that Barry Trotz has done a really good job coming in as a general manager and setting a vision for like 2 to 5 years for the team that might not be the way he has thought about teams necessarily or had to in his other jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. You really do have to be looking like in 5-year increments at least, especially with a team like the Predators, who is not really they're not in a position right now where they're going to contend for the cup tomorrow,
Right.
So you really have to be able to think and evaluate talent and, just kind of balance organizational needs against what you have right now. And yeah, it's definitely on the flip side of that, though. I think it is certainly beneficial to have the coaching experience that he has and to have the
Yeah.
Stanley Cup winning experience that he has,
Yes.
because I think it does help you maybe connect with players in a different way. Not that it's necessarily the GM's job to connect with players, but I think it helps when he can,
Yes.
and that he has a better understanding of kind of what they're going through. And yeah, I think that's a unique thing for someone who has as much coaching experience as he does and has, knows how to connect with players the way he does. I think that helps make it a little less like corporate, I guess,
Yes.
in the
Yes.
dealings with it. So
The business side of it, which he still has to attend to. But I agree with you. I always wonder though, when we see Barry Trotz sitting at Centennial watching practice, I'm like, how is he watching practice? Is he watching it as a general manager right now? Or is he having coaching conversations in his mind as he watches? Like, to be a fly on the wall and just hear how Barry Trotz watches practice would be so interesting. I thought it was kind of interesting because it was very clear that the Predators, I think it wasn't announced maybe publicly, but I think it was clear to the fan base and probably to the organization earlier than they announced the transition to Trotz that the team was going to need to head in a new direction. Like this, we're just going to add a couple pieces and we're going to get back to 2017. Just was pretty evident that wasn't going to work. Did you think were you surprised, I guess, that they undertook this big transition under a new general manager? Or because for me, I would have thought this would be something that David Poile would kick off and then pass off. So I was a little bit surprised that they made the transition to a new general manager at the same time they made a transition to we're refocusing on what we're putting on the ice.
well, I would argue that David Poile did kind of kick it off because
True.
the trade deadline last year was a big first step, I think, in all of this. With you got rid of Mikael Granlund and Matthias Ekholm, and just started all of the these big got rid of big contracts and kind of refocus the organization a little bit. And yes, the Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson stuff came once Barry took over, but I think that the trade deadline in 2023 was really the first step in this,
Yeah.
and that was still under David Poile at
Poile.
that point. And so I think that he really did kind of kick it off, but I think that in order to really, like you were saying, have a successful transition or like a fresh start, you really needed a fresh start. So I think that it made sense for Barry to come in when he did and, kind of maybe make those harder decisions that might be, not to make him sound heartless or anything, but I mean, things that like you get a fresh set of eyes in there that maybe,
Right.
David didn't have at that point. So I think that, the timing of it to me made a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think the way they transitioned it was, well, like you said, Barry Trotz was set up for success. Like he was a part of those conversations, like he was brought in as a part of those, conversations at the trade deadline. But also when the reins were handed over, with those reins came a ton of draft capital and some space, some money to spend. And I think that really set Barry Trotz up for success in the direction that they were going. And I will say this, I think some people felt like maybe Barry Trotz was just going to continue. He was going to be David Poile 2.0, and David Poile would maybe still be calling the shots. And I think Barry Trotz has done such a great job of really pivoting the organization where it needed to happen. And like you said, we do have to give credit to David Poile for kind of kicking that off at the trade deadline. But it was a big change, two big changes, front office and just direction of the team at the same time. And, we're going to talk about coming up here what the biggest moves were that Barry Trotz did once he kind of sat in the chair. I wonder what the chair looks like. I don't know. In my mind, I picture something big and fancy.
Yeah, it's probably more elaborate in your mind. I have seen the chair. It's an office chair, so
it's probably like ergonomic and like orthopedic. Yeah.
From Office Depot.
There you go. It's not that great, but we're going to talk about some of the things that Barry Trotz did when he first sat in the chair coming up here in a minute. And we're going to kind of grade his performance in this first season as general manager. Before we dive into all of that, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Policy Genius. Life insurance is an important safety net for your family, but trying to find the right policy on your own can be time-consuming and it can be overwhelming. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. Policy Genius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to talk you through it. Their award-winning agents take you through the process step by step, and they have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. So we are kicking off our 2023-2024 player evaluations. And on tomorrow's show, we are going to talk about one of Barry Trotz's first moves as general manager last offseason, and that was the signing of Ryan O'Reilly. We're going to talk about Ryan O'Reilly, his contributions to Nashville this season, what we want to see from him going forward, and is he going to be in Nashville when Nashville is ready to contend for a cup? We're going to tackle that all tomorrow. But today we are doing an off-ice evaluation. We're talking about Barry Trotz in his first season as general manager. So one of the biggest decisions that Trotz faced right away was a coaching choice. And, at the end of the season press conference last year, he really kind of left the door wide open. I felt like he was complimentary, but non-committal, I would say, was the vibe when it came to whether John Hines would be back for his last year on his contract. So what did you think, Emma, of Trotz's decision to step away from John Hines and to bring in Andrew Burnett?
So I will agree with you. Excuse me. I think that he was very complimentary, but non-committal. I mean, when people would ask about it, his answer was very cut and dry and correct, which is like, well, John is still under contract with us, which he was. So like, why are you asking, And so I think now in terms of the decision overall to step away from John Hines and go with Andrew Burnett, given what Barry said he was looking for and the direction he wanted to take this team in, I think the decision in itself was absolutely the correct decision. I will say I did not love how he went about it necessarily. I think normally if you're going to make a coaching change and you're going to make a coaching change, you're not going to string the guy along like
rip the Band-Aid.
Yeah, you got to make that change after the season. I didn't love how John Hines still had to sit through like a postseason press conference and all of
Yeah.
that, and like let him drag out. Like it wasn't until Memorial Day weekend, I think, that they announced Andrew Brunette. So it was like well over a month that they let the process drag out, and I think it's not fair to Hines, because at that point, like if he wants to go get another job somewhere, another coaching job, they've already been filled at that point. Obviously,
Right.
now he has gone, mid-season, he took over as head coach in Minnesota. I didn't love the timing of all of that. And I understand like there are things at play, you have to do interviews and whatever, but I think that I understand that Barry Trotz didn't want to fire Hines and not have a plan in place
Right.
immediately. So I get why he did it, presumably, but to me, I look at it from the John Hines perspective, and I think that wasn't the classiest move to kind of string him along for as long as he did. But if we're, like I said, if we're going with the decision in itself, I think it was absolutely the right choice.
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that even watching from the outside looking in, it felt awkward. It felt it, and again, I'm with you. Like I see the logic of it. You have to do interviews if you're looking to add somebody. And Barry Trotz was like, look, John Hines is in, we're still, it wasn't like John Hines. They were like, we are so done with John Hines. I think he was still somebody that they would have let coach out his contract if they didn't feel like there was a different candidate. But the process was a little bit messy, I think, to watch. And maybe it was communicated cleaner internally, but it was hard to watch. Like it was hard to watch.
Can confirm as someone who was an employee of the organization at the time.
At the
was
time.
not communicated
Yeah.
communicated clearly. It felt very messy and awkward internally as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
It
will,
was just a weird time.
yeah. In full disclosure, I really liked John Hines as a coach. And I know I am in the minority with the most vocal section of perhaps the fan base, but really liked John Hines. But I agree with you. I think when Barry Trotz then said, hey, look, we're looking to get faster, we're looking to get younger, there was such a dramatic change in the style of hockey that it made sense maybe to make a dramatic change too. And of course, now we can sit here with Andrew Brunette as a nominee for the Jack Adams, and be like, yeah, but that was a pretty risky, that was a gamble, I think, for Barry Trotz. But I think that it played, it played out very, very well. And I think Andrew Brunette has done a great job. And we're going to talk about Andrew Brunette's season later on this week too. So we're going to dive into that more specifically. But the next thing that I think Barry Trotz did that was very, very big was signing some free agents. And this got, I felt like, some backlash or some concern, I should say concern, from the fan base, because the free agents that Barry Trotz signed were probably not anybody people would say were younger. God love them, in hockey years. And I don't know that people would necessarily say these three older veteran players made the team faster. We're talking about Ryan O'Reilly, Gus Nyquist, and Luke Schenn. And so these moves initially seemed counterintuitive. You spent, like $10 million on three veterans for, that were over the age of 30. Hindsight, well played, Barry Trotz. Like hindsight, well played. Even with Luke Schenn, who had a rough start to the season. But what do you think was so, when you look at those signings, why did they end up panning out as well as they did, Emma, do you think?
Well, aside from the on ice component, I mean, you've got 34-year-old Gus Nyquist having a career year out of nowhere. I like to think, I want to give Barry the credit for that. I don't think even he anticipated that happening.
To be honest, Barry.
Yeah, but like that, obviously Ryan O'Reilly is a Stanley Cup champion. Luke Schenn's a Stanley Cup champion. I think, the reason that those signings were so successful and why he made them were, in this new direction for the team. you're building for the future, but you want to have a culture in place with a competitive team so that when your young guys, your prospects or whoever come up through the system, they're learning from guys like Ryan O'Reilly and Roman Josi and Gus Nyquist. And I think that, those are competitive guys and they know how to win. And so that's what I think, that then when you bring your young guys up through that system, they're not just having, they're not just getting thrown in to the fire and be like, all right, go win us a Stanley Cup. They're learning from the right kinds of players. And, eventually it's like the circle of life, then they become the leaders and they, I think that I think that people who were criticizing the moves, the signings, kind of lost sight of that a little bit because they're like, wait a minute, you said you're going to get younger and you just signed 3 guys in their 30s. And I think it's important. First of all, none of those guys were signed to like max deals or like super long contracts.
Right.
So
we're not talking 8 years here, people.
Yeah. So I think it was very shrewd, very smart of Barry Trotz to do that, because if you want to get the culture set in place, you want to have guys there who can do it, and you want to have guys who have won, like have that winning pedigree and those serial winners that he talks about.
Yes.
So that way, when you have your young guys, whether it's the young guys who are on the team currently or the young guys who are coming up through the system, you want them to learn from those kind of guys.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, just the perspective of being around the locker room, I don't know that I, until this season, appreciated the importance of that kind of culture, because that's kind of one of those words where you're like, I don't really even know what that means. Like you want to have a winning culture. And in my mind, you're thinking they're NHL players. They all want to win. They are all super competitive. They do all want a Stanley Cup, but you see through the course of this season, and it's not really conversations that I saw. I'm sure there were conversations, but you don't necessarily see these like teaching conversations happening in the locker room, but you see players like Ryan O'Reilly at optional skates all the time. And you see Gus Nyquist elevating his game at his age. And there is something to be said for showing younger players the level to which you have to perform when nobody's looking to get to the level at which you have to perform when everybody is looking. And I think that's been huge this season.
It has. And I think that, another maybe common misconception, and I mean, it makes sense that you would think, obviously, if you play in the NHL, your ultimate goal is to win a Stanley Cup. Everyone wants to do that. And you would think maybe like a guy, maybe an older guy who's already won a cup or two in his career is like, I'm chilling. Like I've accomplished what I need to. Now I'm just having fun. I'm playing hockey. Every player, and I have talked to a lot of NHL players in my day, different teams, different stages of their careers. It is without question the most, pervasive common theme that I've found is that once you win a Stanley Cup, that increases your drive like 1,000 times more to go out and win it again, because you know what that feels like. And it's part of it. If you don't have one, you're trying to, you don't know exactly what it feels like and you want to know, but like, it's like chasing a high when you've won it before. And these guys, if anything, even, if they're older or maybe like towards the latter part of their career, they want, if they've won that and they've felt that high before, they're doing everything in their power to feel it again. And so I think that it's not just about like, oh, they won a Stanley Cup. So like, because it's not like they won a Stanley Cup by themselves. Like they were part of a team that won a Stanley Cup. But I think that's part of it, is they understand what the work, like you said, the behind the scenes stuff that goes into it, and team dynamics and what has to be going right for things like that to happen. And so I think that you get, you fill your locker room with guys like that, guys who have that knowledge and they've put in the work, and it's almost like trauma bonding in a way, because it's like you have to go through some serious stuff to like physically, mentally, and I think that it's really important to have guys like that in the room, that the younger guys can learn from.
Yeah. I love what you say about you win a Stanley Cup and you don't feel done.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want another one. It's like getting tattoos. You say you're only going to get one tattoo and you end up getting a whole bunch of tattoos, but it's cooler when you win it.
It's addictive. Yeah.
It's addictive. It is. It's addictive. Yeah. So coming up, we're going to talk about a few of the late season moves that Barry Trotz made that perhaps had some people kind of raising eyebrows. We're also going to talk about the biggest challenges on Barry Trotz's plate moving forward. Definitely some decisions he's going to have to make. Before we do that, I want to let you know this episode's brought to you by our great friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning that Stanley Cup we're talking about. But it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So we have talked about the signings last offseason that Barry Trotz made. I think you and I would agree made some really good calls, probably calls that were so good even Barry Trotz was surprised, which I love. He also signed a few players at the end of this season. He re-signed Tommy Novak, Michael McCarron, and Cole Smith, who we're going to be talking about on tomorrow's episode, as well as Ryan O'Reilly. Emma, people, again, they want to see this team get younger. And so people may be wondering, like, why are you re-signing Michael McCarron and Cole Smith? And we tend to group Tommy Novak in those younger players, but he is the ripe old hockey age of 27. McCarron's 29, Smith's 28. I mean, they're in the midlife of hockey years, which is ridiculous. They're really not. So what is your feeling on these re-signings for these players? Do you feel like this was a good move by Barry Trotz? How do you feel about those re-signings?
I think, yes. I think Novak was the big one. You know, he was, obviously he got the biggest contract out of everyone, but they were able to keep it under, they were able to keep it at 3.5. And I think that's right on the money. No pun intended. Yeah. I think that's right where he should be. Because there are rumors around the trade deadline of, teams offering or being willing to offer Tommy Novak like $5 million or something. And like, I love Tommy Novak. I just don't think that we have enough of a sample size of him. For me, if I were a general manager, I don't know that I would feel comfortable offering him that kind of money for that kind of term. Just right. What we've seen from him is very good. It's just not enough, I think. Like, right. It just hasn't been enough time. So I think that was a very team-friendly deal that they were able to get done for him, and that, locks up a key position at center, which the Predators need. So I think that's really good. McCarron and Smith, I think, were also both great because, again, all three of these were really team-friendly deals. Very. I mean, they're able, and McCarron and Smith are two of those guys who they're part of that identity line that the team and that Andrew Brunette relied on so much this year to really kind of set the tone for, in just the way that they played and the whole being hard to play against. Like, no, they're not going to go out there and, score tons of goals, but they, there's a reason that those guys are the ones who were mostly starting every game, is that
Right.
they, they're the ones that you set the tone with, and that they're the guys who are going to come out and face, the opposing team's top line. And that top line is going to be like, oh, whoa, like I was not ready for that. And so I think it was great because those are guys who, they were able to get at very team friendly numbers and lock them in. And again, goes back to what I was saying before about you want younger guys to be coming up in the system with, the learning from guys like Michael McCarron and Cole Smith and, guys who know how to set the identity that the Predators are looking for.
That's huge. And we talk about that with Ryan O'Reilly and Roman Josi and Gus Nyquist and all of that. And they're great at that. But you are absolutely right to say that same thing applies to McCarron and Cole Smith. And we'll see what happens. We talked about Kiefer Sherwood. We'll see what happens with Kiefer Sherwood, but that line's been huge for the Predators. When it comes to what Barry Trotz has to do next, Emma, what are the biggest decisions on his plate? And do you feel like there is a chance he may make a misstep? Because for me, his first year as general manager, he has done nothing but multiply, I think, the goodwill that he came in with this fan base. So what is ahead for him, and where do you see like this could get a little dicey?
Well, I mean, certainly he'll have the draft. It'll be his first draft as officially as GM, and got a lot of draft capital. I think 9 picks in the first 4 rounds this year, and that's going to be huge, for setting the team up for the future. I think that he has some decisions to make with the current free agents. Guys like you mentioned, Kiefer Sherwood, Jason Zucker, Alex Carrier, and then there's the whole goaltending Pandora's box that we won't open again, but that's certainly a big decision that he has on his plate. I think, of course, there's always a potential for a misstep, but I think that just the way that he's operated, even if you look at this past trade deadline this year, when I think you look at the moves he made, but I think what's just as important, if not more important, are the moves that he didn't make. Like all the guys that we thought for sure were going to be gone. We thought Tyson Barrie was out of here by the trade deadline. He was still there. We thought there was a really good chance Alex Carrier would be gone. And those guys stuck around. And I think that it was very shrewd and very smart of him because of Barry Trotz, because it wasn't just about what's going to make the team better right now. Like, is Alex Carrier the one reason the Predators made the playoffs this year? No. So it's not just about what's going to make the Preds good right now. It's, I think, more about the perception of Barry Trotz as a general manager. And, I think people saw that he kind of had his back against the wall, like, especially with Tyson Barrie as an example. It's like, it was well known that he wanted a trade and they were looking for a trade. And so I have no doubt that there were teams out there trying to, lowball Barry Trotz, because be like, hey, I know you're trying to get rid of this guy. We'll offer you a 5th round pick for Tyson Barrie. And like, not to say that, I just think it was so smart of him to not take those lowball offers, because regardless of, Tyson Barrie wanted a trade and they wanted to move him, he's still an incredibly valuable player. So I think that he knew his worth and he wasn't going to accept anything less than that. And I think that that's huge for his perception among other GMs, because, not to be like, oh, it's the new guy, like, let's take advantage of him because he doesn't know what he's doing,
We're
so I think
his lunch money.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it was very smart of him to not take those offers or not make those moves, because whatever they were, they clearly weren't up to what he thought those players were worth. And so I think that that's good at, setting a tone, and kind of telling other GMs, like, look, I'm playing chess, not checkers. So let's all take this seriously. So with that in mind, and seeing the way he handled himself during the trade deadline, that gave me so much more confidence in his ability moving forward, when it comes to these big decisions like what to do with UC Saros and re-signing Jason Zucker or not. I think his whole strategy at the trade deadline gave me even more confidence in his ability to handle these decisions moving forward.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see where the Predators are at the end of year 2 for Barry Trotz, because I think year 1 under Barry Trotz, you have to say that this was really a success. Nashville exceeded expectations. They made an important pivot. Barry Trotz didn't, like you said, he did not waste a player. He did not waste draft capital. It'll be interesting to see if the Predators actually do this next year, take the step back that Barry Trotz had prepared everybody for this year that didn't happen, how that goes. But I'm with you. I think in his first season, Barry Trotz has done a lot of things to earn a lot of confidence from this fan base. So for me, I think great way to kick it off, Barry Trotz. Not too shabby in that ergonomic chair, my friend.
I know. I shouldn't have pulled back the curtain on that. Shouldn't make everyone think that it's like the Game of Thrones chair that he sits in.
Swords coming out. Come
Yeah.
on, Barry Trotz sits on that throne.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like inside Bridgestone Arena.
That's right. It's ice. It's an ice chair.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
an ice throne. Yeah.
Ice throne on the ice throne. I love it. So that is our evaluation of Barry Trotz, year 1. Not too shabby, Barry Trotz. You have been playing chess, not checkers. We are going to continue our evaluations of the 2023-2024 season. On tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about Ryan O'Reilly. We're going to talk about Cole Smith. Emma, can you let everybody know where they can find you and find your work?
Yes, you can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, same handle on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find my work at The Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at ANK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio on all social media platforms as well. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Predators. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We hope you guys have a great Monday. We'll be back tomorrow with an all new episode. We'll see you then.